Ben Okri writes about how we attempt to explain the misery and evil in the world. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to talk about an interesting short story that I read recently. One that is about doors. I am referring to The Secret History of a Door by Ben Okri, which was published in 2021 in his short story collection, Prayer for the Living. For those who don't know, Ben Okri, or Sir Ben Okri, because he has been knighted, is a Nigerian British writer who has been writing for quite some time. He's won a number of awards for his work. He's also written films and various essays and short stories. And he's he frequently writes in postmodernism, magical realism, and spiritual reality and stuff like that. And some of these stories you could define as like magical realism, or even writing about like the perils of humanity, I would say. After all, the title is Prayer for the Living, of the sort of misery that people go through. A lot of very sad stories that are in this particular collection. I'd be very interested in reading more based on what I found here, because he does seem like a very compelling author. And as I mentioned before, he has been knighted, so that must mean at least somebody in the higher ups in British society views his writing as definitive or like important for the identity of British culture, which is no small feat there. But without further ado, let's talk about The Secret History of a Door. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Secret History of a Door focuses on an unnamed narrator telling the story of a disturbance that happened in the London area. The narrator discusses this door and what it could possibly mean. They talk about how Newgate Prison was torn down, and various parts went around, but they couldn't figure out what to do with a door. They tried breaking it apart, but it refused to do that, and they tried burning it, but nothing happened there, and so they just decided to discard it in the heap of a city. And as time goes on, crime in the city begins to rise, and especially old-fashioned crime, where it seems like there are new gangs rising up, and that's similar to the 18 or 1700s. And just the crimes that were formerly out of style are coming back into play, and nobody really knows what to do. And things change when a young boy says that they saw a ghost emerging from an abandoned door in a trash heap, which appeared to have a noose around its neck. A bunch of priests and psychics show up at that point and proclaim this door to be extremely evil, and I presume somebody like associates it with the Newgate Prison, and they note how that the door might be causing some of the problems. And this causes a bit of a media frenzy, and some poets and artists go to the door. They either draw the door or they write about it, and those who do are changed. Some of the artists never draw again, and some of the poets either develop addictions and die, or they go to the road, and one of them even gets shot down by the police. Clearly these people are quite changed. And then as the story comes to a close, the narrator notes that a boy was playing hide and seek and hid under the door and disappeared forever. It was noted that the boy was very pure of heart, very intelligent as well, and he could he could heal wounded animals, not healed animals, that'd be weird, but like he could heal wounded animals. And implying that a sacrifice had been made there. And it's also notable that after the boy disappeared, the rise in crime went back to normal, and it appears that that seemed to stop things. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, Okri presents us with quite a bit to think about here. One of the objects one of the themes that he's talking about is objects of power, which is a familiar phrase if you've ever played the video game Control, which would suggest that humanity places emphasis on certain objects or items that are emblematic of a certain thing, and that might cause a few problems in terms of those objects interrupting with humanity or disrupting how things go. And so what Okri is noting here is that a door's history gives it, this door's history in the story gives it supernatural power, equating it with that of the Egyptian pyramids, and how some areas in the pyramids could be a door to the spiritual realm and allow the dead to come in and out of the world. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. Theosophists believed that objects absorb the emotions of lives in close proximity to them. This door, which could not be burned and could not be broken apart, became the most terrifying testimony of the depths to which the human heart can sink. When Newgate Prison was destroyed, no one knew what to do with the great metal door, which was its heart. And that's an interesting quote, because it gets at how this door is really a reflection of the place that it had its origin in. And so its history gives this door its power and allows it to do additional harm, supernaturally speaking, on humanity. It represents a great evil and a great misery of humanity, sort of reflecting what humanity is capable of. But if it's a reflection, you might also be able to argue that that we're displacing all of humanity's woes on that door, that we're not actually looking inward and being like, oh, this is what humanity is capable of. We're saying it's the door's fault, which is an interesting way of thinking about things. And so it becomes the focal point of all the terrors of the city. Shadow crimes are on the rise. It seemed like gangs are returning and crime is taking over the city. Well, it must be the door's fault. It must have done something, especially because someone said they saw a ghost coming out of it, and that must be true. And so what do you do in that case when all of this misery seems to be coming from this door? In the game Control, you got to cleanse those objects of power in order for them not to have the same effect anymore. And the same sort of happens in the story, where the boy hides underneath the door, where the boy is said to be quite gifted. And then once the boy disappears, everything seems to be cleansed. Or maybe it was a ritual sacrifice, where the door absorbed someone that it felt was worthy, and now there's going to be no more horror for another 50 or so years until the door decides it needs another sacrifice. I feel like it's more so cleansed than anything else. But again, with objects of power, or what we claim are objects of power, we might not really know how it works, and so the vagueness here does help a little bit in sort of illustrating how we're just kind of lumping things together. Correlation does not necessarily equal causation. And so the correlation not equal causation kind of idea also feeds into another theme that I think Okri is talking about here, and that is supernatural hysteria. Or if he's not talking about it, he might be hinting at it, or it's there and it's worth talking about. Like Okri hints that the door might not actually be magical. It might not actually be evil. It's just there. After all, it's found in a trash heap, and no one ever directly says this is the Newgate door. So it could be like, oh, that door was discarded and this is the door that's been abandoned. Surely the two must be related. And so humans are attempting to explain the horrors of the world. They see crime rising and it must be related to something in society. But again, there's that lack of reflection on what is happening in society, why crime might be rising in the first place, and why humans are doing this. Like, are they doing it because they want to? Is crime rising because there's just some factor at play that isn't being addressed? Nobody's really looking at that. They're just blaming the door because it's easy to blame the door. Something has to be to blame. It might as well be this random object that you found that has the vaguest connection to a ghost of some sort. And this is very similar to the hysteria of the past, or of the 18 or the 1700s, where people were like, oh, we didn't pray enough to God, so this is why all the bad things are happening. And showing that even though we think we might be advanced as a society, we probably aren't, that we still have these supernatural leanings. We still have these sort of lucky or kind of biblical kind of leanings where we just associate things with things that might not necessarily be the case. Again, not looking inward at humanity, not looking at society around us, trying to blame it on some higher power or even some lower power in the depths of hell. The last thing I'll note is that this story is fun, but I think it could be more. I think Okri could have fleshed it out a bit more because it's a pretty short story, only like 5 or 6 pages. And there could be a little bit more in terms of explaining the history of the door, or what happened to the child as they were sent there. It could have been fleshed out upon, and instead it feels kind of bare bones here. A lot of the stories in here are pretty well written, but they do feel bare bones. Like you could obviously elaborate on them and talk more on the themes that were espoused. It's not enough to necessarily sink the story here, but I do think that a lot of these things aren't fully as explored or fleshed out as they could be. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Secret History of a Door by Ben Okri. A pretty solid short story. I just really enjoyed the spooky and supernatural nature of it. I definitely recommend that you go seek it out. Possibly find it in this short story collection, which you might be able to find at your local library. But this is actually really solid and probably worth buying as well. So go seek it out wherever you buy your books. If you have any thoughts on what I just said here, or you just want to comment on this story itself, let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear from you and have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author or this short story or this collection if they don't already know. Also join the Discord, which there's a link to in the description if you want to have further conversations about books or other types of media. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and door-related travels. Farewell.